Recording. Recording. So welcome to everyone who joined online for this webinar. It's a special event, as we were mentioning right now. So today it's a very interesting webinar. We have Anastasia and Kelly, who will talk about storytelling and how to improve our stories in general. And so we are really looking forward to it. To give a really short presentation, Anastasia is an environmental engineer and a former MCSA member, like basically most of us. She holds a PhD in bioscience engineering, and she's been working on urban organic waste, urban food system, and nutrient circularity. And she is, of course, now also an improviser and a storyteller. So we're very happy to now be able to understand what you do and how we can improve also our storytelling. And Kelly also, she's an entrepreneur, consultant, and researcher who is interested in transformative imagination, storytelling, and creative arts-based practices that support sustainability leadership. She's also a creative writer, and she is the co-founder of reimaginary.com, which is a collaborative of practitioners and compendium of resources. So having said that, I'm really happy to have you here, and thank you very much for accepting for having this webinar. I'm very looking forward to it. And now the floor, or in this case, the screen is completely yours. And thank you very much. And I hope all the participants will enjoy the storytelling.
We hope as well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruben, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's super nice to, I would say, to see you, but to not see you, but to have you all here to share our little story about how we came up to also be researchers, storytellers, and discuss with you things that, thoughts that we have about stories, how we can use them and how we should maybe not use them. So my name is Anastasia, as I said. I will be here with Kelly to talk to you today, and also to moderate a bit the interaction, because we won't be able to see you and to really discuss and do any games and exercise. I would like to encourage you to interact, to write to us, to write your questions, your comments, your thoughts, everything that comes up to mind. Fun to it, to see it, and try to make this as much of a conversation as possible.
Yeah, thanks, and welcome everybody. Greetings from Savannah, Georgia, and basically, Anastasia and I met in a Marie Curie Innovation Network training program. And we were all focused, everybody in our program, 15 researchers around Europe, were focused on sustainable place shaping. So how people in places are making their communities more sustainable and how those can be scaled up into bigger projects. And people were coming at it from all sorts of different directions. It was a very dynamic and dedicated group of people. And at the same time, we were, it's a heavy topic, sustainability. Those of us like myself who've been working on this since the 90s, we feel the pressure and we want to change the world. And we also feel the frustration of not getting our points across. So throughout it, and the deeper we got into our research, the more all of us were facing different levels of existential crisis. And the more we were looking for ways to communicate with others and to spark our own joy and rekindle our own motivations. So 6 of us in the group got together and we decided to, learn more about storytelling and to think about how we could actually put the research findings from our projects into stories for children. So with that, we wanted to first ask everybody, as a way to warm up and get everybody on the screen, to put your name and a favorite childhood story or a childhood book into the chat so we can see who's actually here.
Can I also put mine?
Yes, please. And I have to say, you can see mine. They're the ones there on the screen.
There, you can use the chat box. Yeah. Ruben, can people use the chat box or is just the Q&A? No, they can use the chat box, right?
Yeah, they should be able to, because I'm just posting your question to open to everyone. So,
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Yeah. Ruben, you should write yours as well.
Okay, I have to look for the English translation of the
Write it in Italian. No, is it a fable from Aesop? Or because I'm Greek, I see everything being Greek?
The turtle and the hare. No, it's the classic.
Okay. Okay, I'm not gonna try to read that, Ruben. You can maybe. Looks at the ant and the grasshopper. Yes, I love that as well.
Yeah.
We also played it in kindergarten. I remember it. I was the grasshopper. The fun person.
The fun one.
Yeah. Okay, keep it coming. Come on. If it's not a children's story, whatever story, exactly. Whatever story, maybe a movie or yeah. If you are too old to remember your childhood, give us a movie, a recent book, a comic book, just any story. The story of how your grandmother escaped the war. I don't know. Marta, the Lion King. Yeah, Lion King.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Celia. Okay. Keep them coming. Welcome, everyone. Keep the stories coming. Let's just go back to these nice and magical places. And in the meanwhile, we move on, Kelly.
Mm-hmm. So this comic, some of you may have seen this before, but it's a classic, and it always kills me. But it's this communicating about climate change. 1990, I was president of my environmental club in high school, and climate change. Hello, 95. It's definitely a problem. We should really get going. And then, fast forward to 2019. Is this thing on? Are we actually communicating? So this was, like I said, a big part of our personal collective motivation to start on this storytelling journey. And so the result was a book called Once Upon the Future, Everyday Adventures That Changed the World. And we're just going to give you a little taste of how it turned out, a teaser.
Up. Yeah, I have to change the slide.
So after how many years, Anastasia? 4 years? Persistent work.
Yeah.
First we had to convince our supervisors and the kind of the general board of directors and advisors for the project that this was worth doing, telling stories for children. And then we had to go through the training and developing our stories. And then I got years of coaching and storytelling, which was amazing. And we went from skepticism by our supervisors to complete support and enthusiasm. And now they're our biggest cheerleaders. And then we had the book, but we have to distribute the book, and books cost money to produce, etc. And finally we found a publisher. And so the happy ending, well, hopefully not ending, but peak at this moment is that we finally found a publisher called Babidi Boo in Spain, who's a children's book publisher specializing in children's books. And you can find our book on Amazon and all the traditional places. So very exciting for us. So the question of this webinar is, first of all, why tell stories? And second of all, how to tell stories. This cartoon cracked me up. You're not allowed to use the sprinkler system to keep your audience awake. And we were wondering, we think we probably know the answer, but how many people in the audience here has ever fallen asleep during a PowerPoint presentation, or at least nodded off, where your eyelids get so heavy and your head kind of nods back a bit? You can just type yes in the chat if you want to. And then we wanted to ask, why do you think that people tell stories? Guilty, yeah.
After you answer the word, exactly. The worst slot to have on a conference.
Unless you don't want people to pay attention.
Exactly. And then you have sketchy research to show. Yeah, exactly. Good. So yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah.
So what you all have to say of why do you think that people tell stories in general? From your information that you have or your experience, what do you think are some of the core reasons that people tell stories?
Apart from keeping people awake, that we already touched upon it.
Yeah.
And we mean it in maybe we can clarify it. We mean it in a general way, not just for presentations or when we are presenting our science, but in general. So why do we in general tell stories? And yeah, why do we have stories? Why are we talking about stories so much? What are some effects of hearing a story?
About the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To show knowledge of life, of feelings to someone, yes, the personal experience, the emotions, because humans like stories, yes, and we were children, it's how we pass information through generations.
That's so true, yeah.
And how they get sticky, this information, exactly, to spread information, exchange, to learn something. Yeah, it's a nice list, no?
Yeah, yeah.
Shall I
They didn't touch on the dark side, but yeah, you can go to the next slide. So this was our list with similar things to what you said, to help people remember, expand our sense of empathy and see things from different perspectives, establish a common ground for communication. Sometimes you can refer to stories, mutual stories within a group, explore the practical ramifications of an idea. I'm a big sci-fi nerd, so this is a big one for me. Share knowledge, disrupt existing norms, show a different way of being in the world, and of course, spark imagination and curiosity. Convey moral lessons like the grasshopper and the ants and the rabbit and the hare. It can also be used to reinforce existing norms. This is, my work is in creativity and creative methods, and I always say that creative methods, they're not inherently positive, but you can creatively have amazing propaganda, or you can creatively destroy an entire forest in an amazing, efficient way. But you can also creatively save a forest, and you can creatively help people think from new perspectives. So similarly, stories can be used for for good or for bad or for ambiguous, like entertaining people, getting attention and proving status. People love to name drop and tell stories about the time they saw Keanu Reeves and, whatever, he winked at them or something. I don't know. I wish that was my story, but no, it's not. So yeah, so we talk about both the good and the negative side. PowerPoint, as we said, everybody's falling asleep in PowerPoint. And there's this interesting article that really struck me back in 2010 in the New York Times that was called "We Have Met the Enemy and He is PowerPoint." And it was about the war in Afghanistan at the time and how PowerPoint was actually decreasing the ability of the US military to function well, because they were getting these complicated data-driven PowerPoints with no contextual stories. So people were just getting confused by these massive amounts of data that were being downloaded in this structure. But then at the same time, they realized that the PowerPoints also had a beneficial use from their perspective, that they could be used to confuse journalists. So the journalists would have 25 minutes a week where they would be shown something from the military, and the military would show them these PowerPoints. And this is, they called hypnotizing chickens. So when you see a really boring PowerPoint filled with data, you can think about this hypnotizing chickens. You can go to the next slide. And this is a lot of the misconception or the tradition, we could say even the bad habit, because a lot of us know better, but we still fall into this trap of this information deficit model of teaching. So it's looking at it's called an knowledge deficit model. So it's a model of communication that emphasizes the process of repeating sterile, kind of emotionless information that's intended to increase the understanding of the recipient. So it's looking at the recipient as this kind of blank slate that's in need of more information, and we're kind of trying to shove information into their brains. And people are, especially I find in politics and trying to convince social movements, where we want to debunk things, explain why things aren't true, and sound smart, but this is actually not what changes people's minds. Because the arguments are actually won by telling stories that connect with people. And a lot of this is because it's an actual chemical reaction in our brain when we hear a good story. So a good story, when you start to get interested in the question, releases cortisol, which, too much cortisol can overwhelm you with stress, but just the right amount perks up your attention. Suddenly, it's like the sprinkler system in the auditorium. Like you're woken up, you're interested, your eyes, get a little brighter, your focus sharpens, and then as you start to become interested in the story, you start to identify with the character, and you start to learn things throughout the story. It releases dopamine, which is pleasure and reward. So, and then finally, as you really start to identify emotion, oxytocin, which actually results in pro-social behaviors. So they've shown that when you start to empathize with the characters, you're more likely to take action afterwards. So this is why people like stories. It's a great, chemical cocktail in our brains. And it also engages a variety of kinds of intelligence. I love this model by Howard Gardner in his theory of multiple intelligences. And it's not that we each have one kind of intelligence, but especially those of us in science, we're so driven by the logical, mathematical, and the linguistic. We're great writers, we're great at communicating logically. There's so many other kinds of intelligence that we possess and others possess. And so when you tell a story, you can access all those different kinds of intelligence and engage all these different parts of your brain. So next slide. This is how I think of our brains on stories. This, we start bursting with ideas and information and different emotions. And the next slide, I love this quote by Edmund Burke, that the first and simplest emotion we discover in the human mind is curiosity. And this, from the curiosity of a child, I think of 2-year-olds running around asking why, to curiosity as the basis of science. At the same time, it's wise to be skeptical of stories. I love the quote that the plural of anecdote is not data. Just because you tell a good story, one good story, it happened to your, loopy Aunt Lucy, doesn't mean that this happens to everybody, or that you can extrapolate into a wider set of data and scientific facts and assumptions. So it's important to know that these two things work together. And it's also important to know that that stories have been used as propaganda for thousands and thousands of years. I've just been doing some interesting research or listening to some interesting historical research about the Roman Empire, and how even then they were framing stories, framing the story of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, for example. And Cleopatra was the evil foreign woman seductress. So these memes that kind of go throughout history, it can be used as propaganda. So it's good to be aware of the power of story and the power that they're having, the chemical power that they're having over your brain, so that you can understand how it's affecting you, and then you can support the story with data and then work together synergistically. I think one of the primary that I've experienced as an audience is that you feel like you're just a blank face in a sea of faces. That model that we fall into out of a bad habit. And I think that the magic of storytelling is that it helps us to remember that we're human and why we're doing what we're doing. And it also helps us to humanize the audience. So as I put it, we can stay human, have empathy for the audience, and it kind of magically transforms us from being an expert presenting findings to an audience to being a human who is relating with delight and vulnerability, and who is discovering and igniting the interest and curiosity with other humans. So it goes from this kind of sterile structure into a way of relating with other people. So then we figured out why we want to tell stories, the effect that they have. But then, of course, the question is how? How do you tell a good story? We all know that the story starts with once upon a time, and it ends with the end. But what happens in between?
So this is a bit for all of you. This is, so we know once upon a time, it's the beginning, the end, it's the end. Let's see what we can put in between, or how to start thinking about stories. What we wanted to do a bit with this webinar, it's also to have you working along, to start thinking about your stories, and maybe even your story, not so much like we can also do it as small anecdotes that we put here and there to liven up our presentations. But what we want to invite you to do here with us today is to dig a bit deeper, to find the delight and the joy within you as a scientist or as a science communicator. So this is why we will be throwing some questions there for you to answer. Feel free to either grab a pen and a paper, or open a Word document and just dot some notes there, or we'd also be super happy to see your answers here on the chat. So if you want to share some ideas, or some small little phrases about what comes in mind if someone asks you, why did you become a scientist? Or another one to this direction is, why did you choose your specific topic or your specific field? Or why did you choose to work on what you're working on? Or in your lab, in your office, behind your computer, and do your things and just do it there. That's what you're paid for, after all, right? So these are the things that we would like to have you thinking about it. We have answers coming up because of two reasons. I want to read them aloud here, but I invite you to read what other people are writing, and also think for yourselves. And we also wanted, if you want a bit of help, I would also like to give you some tools here to help you keep going. So here is, these are some Dixit cards. It's a great game, and these are some cards that we've been using a lot. So this is your task. We will give you a few minutes. Kelli will play us some music, maybe?
Let me see.
Okay, let's see if we can do it as well. But we're not promising. But so I invite you to pick a card. Just don't overthink about this. Just pick the first card that draws your attention. And according to this card, think how this card relates to your path as a scientist or as a science communicator. Just pick the card that really you feel driven to it without overthinking it, and then try to figure out how this card relates to your path as a scientist or as a science communicator. And I do invite you to take a pen and a paper or open a Word and just throw some sentences there. You have 3 minutes, and go on, have fun.
Can you hear it? You can hear the music?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, so 3 minutes we're giving. Okay.
Okay, our time is up. Good. I hope you all had some fun, had some little fun, yeah, connecting these images a bit dreamy with your path. What would you choose, Kelly?
I chose 7.
Ah, okay. Why? Can you tell us?
Now I feel that I don't know where it's going.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I've even lost a little bit track of why, if I even believe in the possibility of social change for sustainability.
Yeah.
So I feel a bit like the snail. Like now I feels like it's just, I'm still motivated by the question, but maybe it's going to be slow and winding and heading somewhere, I don't know where. And it's a bit of an effort. But it's what's there for me to do. It's my work somehow.
Yeah.
And that feels like enough at this point. Like I'm ready, I'm willing to just embark in the stairs, not knowing where it's going.
Yeah, that's good. And always one step at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you?
Spontaneous. Second choice would be 5, I think, because it's sometimes it's hard, but sometimes also working in research feels like being in a candy store, you know. It's always like you open these things and you find another cool thing, and as you said, you don't exactly know what is going to happen, and sometimes it doesn't really fit to have like a ladybug that, you know, it has a nut inside, but it is what it is. So you just go along. Exactly.
And they all kind of look like they're having fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't know what they're doing, but they're enjoying it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah. So if anyone else wants to share, feel free to write on the chat. Would be glad to read what you have to say. And if not, we'll just move on. Floor is yours.
Yeah. So, from what we've learned and experienced, the basis of telling a good story comes down to the central question that propels the story forward. This just cracks me up. It's a short story. Will you publish my short stories? Answer, no. The end. So this is the beginning. So you have a question, and then you get an answer, but then how do you engage the audience? And this is we have another next slide. A little video by Andrew Stanton. You can watch the whole TED Talk. It's really good. He's a Pixar expert, producer, storyteller, and his words are very resonant for me here. Huh. Strange.
If you don't, I have to share my sound as well. I think that's why that is happening.
Ah, okay.
But I can, can try to quickly. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I will share my sound as well. In the meanwhile, yeah. Kelly, you have to entertain the audience.
I don't want to give away the punchline though.
Okay, it's ready. It's ready.
See.
Greater affirmation than when we connect through stories.
Can you hear now?
It can cross the barriers of time, past, present, and future, and allow us to experience the similarities between ourselves and through others, real and imagined. The children's television a social worker that said, frankly, there isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you've heard their story. greatest story commandment, which is make me care. Please, emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically, just make me care. We all know what it's like to not care. You've gone through hundreds of TV channels, just switching channel after channel, and then suddenly you actually stop on one. It's already halfway over, but something's caught you, and you're drawn in, and you care. That's not by chance, that's by design.
So this quote, make me care, please, emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically, just make me care. I think this is the fundamental rule of storytelling. So you have the question, but then why do you care? Why do you care about this question? And this is when you're trying to identify why you should care, you really have to think about the audience. Why should they care? Why you care personally, and also why they should care. So it's not just a one-way street of you communicating your passion, but understanding why you care together. And you all may have heard, it's very trendy in the business world, but Simon Sinek's golden circle of starting with the why and then moving to the how and then to the what as a way to communicate and to be a good leader. And I love that this connection with the actual brain science, that the why, the purpose and the motivation, and even the process of how you start to realize your why activates the limbic brain, which controls your trust and your decision-making and your gut feelings and your sense of loyalty. And you're more likely to then listen to the details of the how and the what once your why is engaged. And of course, if you get to the what and your logic tells you that the why was BS, listen to that and communicate with your limbic brain and say, let's start over. But, when you're trying to communicate your real story and your truth and your research, starting with the why is important. And as we said, starting with the ambience. This is a great tool you can find online. It's called message box communication, and there's descriptions of how to use it. But I think it's very useful to really, before you start telling your story. So you have kind of a general sense of what you want to convey, you have why it's important to you, and then start to think in more detail about the audience and the key messages before you start moving into your story structure and the details of your story. So what is the core issue? Like, your most literal Googling, and who is impacted, who can change this, who cares, who are you going to be talking to in your next presentation, for example? What are some of the key problems? So what? What is this? What does the audience value? How is this going to impact them? What solutions are you presenting? What benefits, etc. It's just, even if it's just a quick sketch, it's very helpful to clarify what you're trying to communicate and to who. And then you start to get into, let's not say the fun part, but okay, let's say the fun part. Your characters and your action. So one of the key tips for thinking about your story is thinking about that the characters have agency. They're not going to be passive recipients, but sources of action. And also think about, who is the hero? Are you the hero? Is your research team the hero? Is your research the hero? Is your audience the hero? And you're giving them a tool to help them on their heroic journey. But think about the agency, of all the different characters in your story. And then there should always be a moment of transformation. This is what's going to make the story interesting, make you care. What's the before and the after? What's a decision that was made? Just making a decision is a form of agency. And this is going to be the kind of the crux of the story. What happened before? Where were you, and where did you end up? And it could, even if it's, I wanted to do this research, and I thought that I was going to learn everything about the benefits of creative methods and arts-based methods on helping people solve their leadership problems. And then afterwards, I became more cynical, but then I applied it in a different way. So it doesn't have to be it doesn't always have to be a positive transformation, but what was the before and after state? Think about that in your storytelling. And you can kind of, if you're looking for a story to tell, people love overcoming a difficulty. I mean, that's just like one of the most classic, like, there's a problem. I couldn't get the research funding, and I had nearly given up because I didn't find, I spent 4 years in the lab, and I didn't find the answer. Will I find the answer? Will I get more funding? Will I give up and become a baker in Maine? What's a big difficulty, and how did you overcome it? I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Anastasia.
I just want to say, just to think, a big difficulty. Kelli mentioned the funding, that it's something that it is indeed big, and we all struggle with it, but something that can be very personally big for you, and it was a bit effort for you, and it changed you in ways that maybe it's not necessarily obvious. It could be that you moved. It could be that you had to, I don't know, change desks, or okay, that was maybe a bit silly, but you get the point. It's exactly.
Yeah. In research, you have to overcome problems every single day. Yes. Yes.
Exactly. We really have plenty of these stories, because very often you have both overcome, to overcome problems with the research itself and with everything else. You have to deal at the same point. Changing career, it's also a big one.
That is a very, very big one. Yeah.
That's a good transformation story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Keep the ideas coming. It's good to read what everyone thinks.
So my next hot tip is engage the senses. You all may have heard about the effect of mirror neurons, and how when you're watching a baseball game, for example, they've done studies of the brain actually lighting up as if you're swinging the bat. So the parts of the brain that feel physical activity are actually being engaged by watching it or by hearing about it. So if in your story, think about some of the sensuous details. It's easy for us, I think, as in this logical, mathematical, rational, linguistic intelligences, to kind of forget about the rest of the body and the senses. But even if it's we were talking about the question, like, why do you show up at your desk every day? Maybe it's part of it's the smell of coffee, and the feeling of warmth. Maybe it's, you could tell a story about walking to the lab and, feeling the wind, or, different seasons, but getting some kind of sensuous detail into your story makes it a lot more effective, and actually evokes those feelings, or those sensuous feelings, in the audience. Yeah, go ahead. And then linked to that is the emotions behind it. So you feel, you smell the richness of the coffee, and you feel the warm mug, and then how do you feel? Like a sense of satisfaction, a sense of determination. Like, okay, now I have my coffee. Now the day can start. But any kind of emotions that you feel in a story are going to be valuable to share. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that in your improv. It's a lot about evoking emotions.
No, I think you covered it, quite well. I don't have anything else special or specific. Maybe, just adding as you said, and again with emotion, sometimes we think that, we think of disappointment or with joy, but there are also some things, as you said, the pride of all the achievements we are doing because of all these problems we are overcoming. This is also something, for example, good way for all of you to start thinking of stories and where actually emotions have their place in the stories we tell or the way we are talking about our science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even there's this quote that I always remember that that fear or anxiety is excitement without breath. And I think of how emotions can transform. So you're terrified by something, you think of a roller coaster, you're getting to the top and your stomach, you're holding your breath. And then when you start to breathe and you let yourself go, then it's this sense of exhilaration and excitement that you're there. So how emotions can kind of transform based on your attitude towards them as well, I think is a fun part of a lot of stories.
Mm. Maybe then actually I will add to that, and also how when we are standing in front of an audience talking to them, the audience really is mirroring our emotions unavoidably. So the joy or the pride we are having, it's contagious. The stress sometimes as well. So it's it's important to find the joy and to find the pride and to find the relaxation.
Interest.
Exactly.
The curiosity that's driving you.
Exactly.
But our final tip is to think about metaphors. So using different metaphors can help you see the world in completely different ways and actually open up different spaces of possibility and understanding of types of actions you can take, different ways you can engage. A lot of my research is on the power of metaphorical thinking and kind of based in the field of neurocognitive linguistics and opening up spaces of new possibility for action and being aware of the metaphors that you're using. So when you're maybe brainstorming about a story, think about maybe the unconscious metaphors that you might be communicating and whether or not you want those metaphors in your story. Like, are you talking about person, or are you talking about it as like this is like, is your project like a clock? You can show the next one. Is your project like a jungle? The next one. Is your project like a disco? I mean, if you look through those lenses, you're going to have a completely different reaction, and you're going to remember the information in a different way, and you're going to have a different set of possibilities that emerge from that applied metaphor, and it's sticky in different ways.
So coming to that, we would also like to invite you to flex a bit our imagination and our imagination to make some metaphors. I invite you to pick a random word from this word cloud here and then make a metaphor. Like my project or my research or science is like blah and why. Maybe I will make one just to show that it's just an exercise. Feel free to be a bit silly. So I will say that science is like I see here a horse. Science is like a horse. It can take us in many places, although it's a bit old-fashioned. Well, maybe that's not a great metaphor, but we're just exercising here. Kelli, would you like to try?
Yeah, let's see. Science is like a trench. So a lot of times you have to dig. You see the surface of something, and then you have to dig, and then you can build up protections. So the science can actually protect you against ignorance, like a trench protects you.
Good. Better than mine. It's good.
Very spontaneous.
It's
Just to
good.
practice your metaphorical thinking.
Exactly. Let's see. Science is like a roller coaster. Yes, ups and downs are expected, celebrated, and dealt with.
Nice, yeah.
Good one. Yeah.
I like that.
Science is like a tower. Might take a long time to build it up, but a short time to fall down. Yes, indeed.
Oh, it's true.
Exactly. Good one.
Yeah.
Science is like a trip. Yeah, as
Mhm.
well. You go, you discover. It's fun. Sometimes it's tiring. Sometimes you want to go home.
Yeah.
I'm not very positive today.
Sometime your flight gets delayed and you end up running through the airport. Just happened to me yesterday. So.
Science is like a ladder, to slowly go up. Yeah, and you can only do it step by step, huh? Especially with ladders. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Let's keep it there. Yeah. Feed your imagination. Have fun. We are here to read it. Science is like. Okay. Yeah, I see the explanation for the trip. We don't know which adventures we will have and meet interesting. Yeah, indeed. And science is like a coin. Depending on your perspective, you can tell a good and a bad story. Indeed. That's great. Wow. People,
I like that one.
We have imaginations
Cool.
there in full function. Great. Okay. Yes. So just to close, we also wanted to give you some more little practical things as well. If you ever heard something about storytelling or some science communication training, you will have heard that the stories usually have 3 acts. So the structure of the story, the way we build them, or a lot of people build them, or we traditionally build them, is in these 3 acts, where first we have the setup, we have the platform, where we are describing how things normally are every day. And then there is this really small inciting incident that kind of happens, and the balance changes. That could be the Titanic is hitting the iceberg. It could be the hero or the heroine. They find out that they are a king or a queen, and they find out that they are the chosen ones, this type of things. And then comes the main body, that it's the action. So things happen one after the other. Things happen one because of the other in these simplified forms, until they reach the end, where we think everything is lost. But then, let's say, maybe they are lost, maybe they are not. But there is, after that, we have there the question to the answer that Kelli mentioned before. And after that, we have the resolution, where things gradually return to another steady state, to another platform. Things are not the same. That's why we're telling the story, but they're coming gradually to another balance. And here also we are giving you a little game. Unfortunately, we cannot play it all together, but it also comes from improvisation. We do it a lot to practice the storytelling form. So we give it to you as a tool to experiment with friends or with your colleagues, or even with yourself. So it's telling a story in 8 sentences, and each sentence starts with one of these 8 phrases that we are giving you here. So start, but once upon a time, there was a scientist that worked on environment, let's say, and every day study to analyze samples from water. So this is the platform, until one day we have then the inciting incident, until one day there was no more water to analyze in the lab. And because of that, so then it starts this one after the other incidents that bring us until one day, final thing that made everything come to a resolution. And ever since that day, we have the new normal, let's say. So this is it's really fun to play. So go on, and we say it like we play it in groups of, let's say, 2, 3, 5. We'd say one sentence, and we go like this.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, we just wanted to suggest that you could take this structure to your colleagues or your friends when you're developing your next presentation, and just have a little fun with it, play with it, or even just on your own, you could play with it as a way to just kind of spark the way you think about your story.
Exactly. Yeah. So
like a muscle, your storytelling capacity is like a muscle. It helps if you exercise it.
Exactly. Yeah. Finally, to give you some more prompts. We mentioned them earlier. A lot of them, Kelli also during her talk. To think about how to connect to your story of why you're doing what you're doing and what brings you the joy in the research that can then bring it on stage when you're talking to people. So other questions that you can ponder about, it's what motivates you to show up every day. You can think about mentors or early role models, a person that influenced you, that inspires you.
Yeah, these kinds of questions can help you if you're stuck looking for a story.
Exactly. And with that was all from us. We have very few time for questions and answers. But feel free to hit us again, either with a question and answer or in the chat. We would be super glad to answer any questions. Or if you, Ruben, have any questions because you're there.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for your presentation and all your overview. And yes, you have the chat open. People can also raise their hands and I can then allow them directly to talk if they're willing to. That's not a problem. So then I would like to start with a question, Ben, in case the audience is like thinking about it. So we are talking about like building the stories and many things, and we try also find difficult sometimes to create a story. So what is there some techniques, or from your experience, like if you want to start a story and you really have no idea on how to build it up or how to really put yourself on the table and have this paper, your computer, and start writing, is there some secrets, or from your experience, how did you improve the first, literally the first, let's write something, I want to write right now, but I'm not really inspired?
Mm-hmm.
Go on,
Sure. I would say it depends on the kind of story you're writing. So it's really hard to say, because you have a fiction story, for example, what we did to writing middle grade fiction stories, short middle grade fiction stories. You have like maybe a myth you want to tell, that would be completely different structure, like an ant and the grasshopper. Or you have a personal story, something you want to share, either from your personal life or from your research. So I guess before, like I said, before I started, I would think of, okay, what's my motivation here? Why am I writing? Why do I want to write this story? So start with your own why about why you want to write the story. And then, if you're writing a fiction story, start with the core messages. What are you trying to get across? And then just, start brainstorming. Feel free, just, I feel like there's this kind of archetypal writer, who's writing, and then they take their paper and they crumple and they throw it away, and then they write and they crumple and they throw it away, so kind of metaphorically just dive in and start until something sparks you and makes you feel a bit excited, and you get your inspiration back.
Yeah, I'm very much agree with this, with what Kelli says, especially the last point. To me, I think that it's really, there's never a lack of stories. We're just censoring ourselves too much and say, oh, no, that's not good enough. I need to find something better, something more clever, an idea that's more catchy. So no. So what I do, and it's something that I learned we do it a lot in improv, for example. We would just come up with everything. We just continue with everything that comes up without judging. Okay, I just do crazy brainstorming. I will write at least 20 ideas in 2 minutes. Some of them will stick, but just write them down before you have time to say, no, that's stupid. No, that's not good enough. So to me, that crazy brainstormings work quite well.
Yeah. And Anastasia's story in the Once Upon the Future book is about a carrot, Charlie the carrot, who ends up in a compost pile, or ends up in the trash. And his greatest dream is to go find the great compost. to become a part of the cycle of life. And I'm sure that this was not her first idea. So there was a lot of different ideas that came into it.
Thanks.
Mhm.
So is some from the audience have some other questions? I'm checking the chat if someone is raising their hands.
And you can follow us. We're on Facebook at Upon Future. We post stuff now and then, but you can also communicate with us that way.
Exactly, and
guess
send us
mine
also
is-
questions. Yeah, send us also or connect or have a chat.
And you can also check out reimaginary.com that myself and 2 other people from our story group and a couple other colleagues worked on it. It's a compendium of creative methods resources. So a lot of them do help to stimulate creativity and thinking about storytelling as well.
Yes, the address, exactly.
Yeah.
And the Babbity Boo address, we could put back in there. Let's see, where is that?
Okay. What about you, Ruben? What do you do when you need to find
Yes, so
stories?
I changed. So my story was that I started my PhD and I was working in animal science, animal nutrition. And during my PhD, then it was, of course, an ITN, so it was sponsored by a Marie Curie scholarship. There was the need, of course, within the contract to disseminate and work in science communication, which is something that now is really active also from the European point of view. You always have to disseminate and outreach and stuff like that. So I stepped up at the time because I was interested in science communication and know how it works. So I had no idea before. And when I started working my PhD, within the 3 years that I was doing the communication and sort of being then with the Marie Curie Association, communication working group and stuff like that, I became passionate. And so when I was finishing my PhD, I was like, this is something that I would like to work with in future. So I did, if I don't change now, maybe I will keep working in animal nutrition, animal science university, and I won't be able to change after. So I decided to make the step and move on communication. And so now I work for a medical communication company. So we are an agency and we support basically pharmaceutical company in building communication for them, and could be educational creation of symposium events or booklets or whatever. So I'm definitely on the medical communication side and science communication. So I changed completely my work. So I work on mostly human instead of animals, different clients. And so,
It's a happy end in the story, though.
yes,
Good.
absolutely. So then I don't see any other question. I think Kate, we will reach out in later on Facebook and we'll thank you later. So we are running over time. So I would like to thank you again for your very interesting webinar. It was cool to see also the experience of the others in the chat and their metaphor and stuff like that. And I'm sure they will reach out to you, they will read the book. And of course, all the links are here and I will make them available also somewhere in the blog or the Marie Curie, or you will find the story as well. So thank you again. Great. And I wish you a nice evening or morning, depending on which side of the world you are at. And yeah, thank you again also to all the participants.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank
Take
you
care.
all. Bye.
Happy endings.